if you are a local library or a school library and you want to upgrade or implement an integrated library system to help you streamline or automate the various library operations, but you also don't have or the budget to get a development team to make your own system or purchase any of the cloud-based systems that are available, there are a lot of open source and free systems online that you could use. And one of the best, if not the best system currently out there is Koha. So Koha is a free open source web-based ILS, and it's used worldwide by various types of libraries, and it is actually the first free library software automation package on the market. So if you've never interacted with Koha before, this is a demo page on the staff side, and you might see some things that you might recognize from your own systems. Now, as great as Koha is, people have experienced some trouble in actually installing and running it, especially if you've never had to interact with an ILS system before, and even more so if you've never had to work with a Linux based operating system, which Kohan needs. So that's why over the course of a couple of videos, I'm going to explain to you how to get your Koha system up and running, from actually installing the Linux based server that you'll need to use to operate it, to actually installing Koha. And maybe somewhere along the way, we might also look at the other ILS options there are, open source of course, such as Evergreen. So, as I stated previously, Koha requires a Linux server to operate, which can be frustrating if you've only ever used a Windows or Mac OS before. Maybe you also don't have a dedicated computer to run that Linux system. Especially if you're a small library that maybe is just starting out, or you know, you don't have the budget for multiple computer systems dedicated to one task only, you can actually look into using VirtualBox. So, VirtualBox, for those of you who don't know, is a general purpose full virtualization software targeted at laptop, desktop, server, and embedded use. Basically, it creates these virtual machines on a single physical computer, and on those machines they could have their own separate operating systems and applications that will run independently of your host computer, of your host operating systems. Basically, it's like having a computer inside of your computer. So it's thanks to this technology that, especially if you want to test out different applications that require specific operating systems, you can create virtual machines, load in your operating system, well, install your operating system, and then install your application as needed. For the sake of these tutorials moving forward, that is what we are going to do. So the first thing that you're gonna want to do is just simply Google VirtualBox download. The first option or page that you're gonna see is from the official Oracle VirtualBox website, where you can download your the application. So after clicking on it, the first thing that you're going to see is the VirtualBox platform packages. So basically, this is where you download the specific platform package catered to what your current operating system is. If you are currently on a computer that has a Windows operating system installed, you would want a Windows host platform package. If you are using a MacBook, you could choose between one of the two Mac operating systems. So I have a Windows host, so I'm going to click this option. While While that is downloading, you would also want to download your ISO. That is basically the operate an online copy of the operating system that you would use to install on your virtual machine. Think of it as when you're setting up a computer, a new desktop, a new workstation for the first time, and you don't have a pre-built-in operating system on it. If you have to install it on it your and configure it yourself, you would normally get it on a CD or a flash drive. It's basically the same thing. This is basically the same thing, whereas you could just download it from online. So you search up Debian.org, and you're going to be taken to the home page where you could just click the download button here to get your ISO file. Once you've done all of that, you're going to actually install your VirtualBox. There's not a lot of important steps into how to download it. You just click yes to everything. If you need to put it in a specific file on your host computer, that's fine. That is up to your discretion. But the installation process is very quick and easy. So once you have it actually installed on your system, you're going to want to click on it, and it is going to lead you to this interface here. At this point, I have a Koha library test server up and running, but obviously we want to start ours from scratch. So what you would want to do is you would click on this button here, new, and this is the interface by which you are going to create your virtual machine and select your operating system. So you could name it whatever you want. People normally name it after the operating system it is being put on or what it is basically going to be used for. So you could name it Koha library system or library server, or you could even name it after the operating system. And the nice thing about VirtualBox is, depending on the name you choose, it will autofill the type of operating system that you're going to install on the virtual machine, its subtype, and its version. So because we are doing this as on a Debian operating system, it will autofill to that. Now, you don't have to use Debian. You could also use Ubuntu. Just by going on the Koha website, you could get what Linux servers they would actually recommend to use on it. I'm just using Debian, but if you want to use Ubuntu, you can. It doesn't really matter. It works out the same way in terms of actually creating the operating system. So after you input your name and you pick the folder that you want the virtual machine to be saved under to host the virtual machine, I normally just leave it as is. The interface VirtualBox will already fill this in for you. I don't really think you need to pick anything else unless you want it in a very specific folder. Now you want to load your or select your ISO image. So you're just going to click down here. Because I have made my test server, it is going to automatically recommend me an ISO because it's seen that I've used it before. But in your case, you are going to want to click on Other and then go directly to your downloads and click on the ISO that we just downloaded. And then after this part, you're going to also click on skip unattended installation. This is basically making it so that we have to install and configure the operating system all on our own. Sometimes you can do unattended installation, but it can sometimes lead to a lot of complications, especially if you're running it on like an older system. And the process to actually do it manually doesn't take that long. So I normally just click on skip unattended installation. After that, you're just going to click next. So here you're going to choose the amount of RAM and CPU that you're going to enable the virtual machine to use. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to use up all of that RAM or all of those processors, especially if it's not currently running, but you can configure it to how you need it. For the most case, you can just leave it however whatever VirtualBox sets it to. You can, if you want to, give it some more base memory or give it an extra CPU processor to work with, as long as it doesn't go into like these darker color areas, because then you're giving it too much and you run the risk of slowing down or even crashing your host system. So I'm just going to leave mine at 2048 and I'm going to give it two processors to work with. Now you have here the virtual hard disk. Now for Koha, or specifically for Debian, it is recommended to give it at least 32 gigabytes hard disk or of storage to work with. So that is what I'm going to have it set to, and that is what I recommend. You can give it more. You can give it more, but it of course depends on how much storage you have on your system currently. You don't want to give it too much or more than half, because obviously your host system still needs something to work with. You could ignore this because you wouldn't have an existing hard disk file, and you don't need to add a virtual hard disk to do this. So I'm just going to leave this unclicked. So after that, they're just going to make a summary of the information that we just inputted in. And once everything checks out and looks good to you, you could go ahead and click finish.